Once upon a time, there was a little girl who felt all alone and not enough love. This is a story of complex trauma and the darkness in its wake, yet also, sometimes, light at the end of the tunnel. That is, if we can find reconnection, that safe, loving space with each other, ourselves, our body, our inner child, and maybe even God. This is the story of Kadri Aworigo. So you grew up in Estonia. I don't know anything about Estonia, really. I mean, I know a few things, but thinking back on that landscape, both culturally and emotionally and everything else, surely it must have shaped you in a lot of ways into who you are and who you've become. So when you think back on those early years, what are some of the first things that come to mind?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I mean, certainly, I think you can almost see the personality of a sort of traditional Estonian, and I think that's shifting now. Like, if I look at some of my relatives who are still living in Estonia, are kind of my generation, but I've stayed there, and that's shifting. But you certainly see that kind of very reserved, very individualistic. A lot of the times, yeah, you don't get a lot of emotion out of Estonians usually, unless they're drunk, which is also probably another characteristic that probably you see a lot with Estonians, and certainly has impacted a lot of my kind of personal history and childhood as well. So yeah, drinking alcoholism is a very big kind of part of Estonian culture and issues therefore as well.
Yeah. And then certain childhood events seem to have pushed you even further into independence and, self-reliance and growing up and all those kinds of things. So, yeah, I started with the Estonia question because I didn't want to go straight into the darkness, but let's just go there now.
Sorry, I could have let it straight there.
No, I want to go there. I want to go there, but I want to be delicate. I mean, part of this story and the theme today is finding safety and finding that real connection where you can kind of let go and feel and not feeling like you have to be a certain way or you have to protect yourself or you have to do it by yourself. That we can together have this conversation together. So, not knowing you yet, I wanted to sort of start this safe little Estonia question. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, yeah, I want to go straight into the darkness if you're ready.
Let's do it.
So honestly, the story itself is enough. So maybe just tell the story starting from the beginning, and then I'll just kind of chip in here and there. And it's a beautiful, sad, but hopeful story. It's a story that I think relates to a lot of us because it's this battle between self-reliance and independence and connection and surviving versus actually feeling. But let's just start with yeah, those early years, maybe even before you had language or conscious memory.
Yeah, yeah, interestingly, I've been thinking about that part quite a lot. So I guess to give some context, I'm the only child of my mom and dad, but they both had children from previous relationships. So I have a number of half siblings who are quite a bit older than I am, and my one of my brothers and one of my sisters in particular, who are sort of my mom's side of this equation, are the ones who probably feature most heavily in kind of my story as well. And my dad always seemed to have problems with alcohol. And I mean, this is what I know of other people because he died by suicide when I was only 3 years old. And by this time, my parents had already split. It was quite a turbulent relationship. He was sober for a little while before I was born, and then probably about the first year of my life. And actually during that period things were seemed to be pretty good between my mom and my dad. But after that point he lost his father and had to we moved back into his family home with to support his mother, my grandmother, and that seems to have been when things really kind of started unraveling with him. He started drinking again. He was quite jealous of where my mother was working at the time. She was working at like a bar, And yeah, so I'm not entirely sure of all the details. I was, two, 1, 2, 3 years old. But at some point during that period, they split. We moved out. We kind of lived in a couple of sort of temporary places for a bit, and then when I was 3, my dad died. But why I kind of mentioned my siblings here as well was because even when my dad was still in the picture, he was working. Even when my mom was kind of home, supposedly looking after me, really the primary carers for me in those early years were actually my siblings. So they put in probably most time with me when they weren't in school. They would have been 10 and 13 when I was born. So there was a lot of disconnect in the family already. My mom didn't really seem very interested in being a mom, so she was kind of doing everything but mothering at the time. And that's really significant for a number of reasons. And I guess that kind of unfolds further in the story as well. But then during my mom and dad's separation, and my sister was actually also kicked out of the home during that period. So she kind of entered into very sort of rebellious teen years, and that wasn't handled particularly well. So from every angle, I was kind of getting these messages of, you have to be a certain way to be accepted in this home, to be even allowed to exist within this home. And so I think that's also something that's really impacted me moving forward. Because even though I wasn't consciously conscious of these events and patterns at the time, I would have known that someone who was one of my closest caregivers at the time suddenly was no longer there, and that there was so much tension going on in the home that would have impacted me even at this kind of proverbial stage of my development. And then, of course, just the complete disappearance of my dad. And of course, I was 3 years old. I had no idea what was going on. I only found out last year that I didn't even go to his funeral. My mom decided to kind of shield me from it, and that's just kind of where it stayed. He was never really spoken about much in our house, so it left me with a whole lot of questions about, yeah, why did he leave, right? Why did he make these decisions? And I remember even quite early on, kind of carrying that feeling of kind of I must have not been enough of a reason for him to stick around. And of course, looking back now, I understand that, mental health and suicide, it's all a whole lot more complicated than that. But that really left a mark for me, and kind of was really internalized that feeling of never quite being enough for people, always trying to be more and trying to be what they need and want at any time.
Yeah. So you're just kind of born into disconnection in a way. You lost your father. Your mother wasn't really emotionally or physically there enough. Then you lost your sister in a way because she was ostracized, kind of kicked out. So then, what do you do? How do you adapt at that point, right? So what did you do?
I mean, in the immediate, I was so young. I to be honest, I don't remember how I really reacted in that moment.
Well, in the teen years, for example, or when your conscious memory does arise.
Yeah, there's this switch in my life, and to be honest, I still can't quite place it in terms of when exactly it happened or why. But I guess I have that intuitive knowing that has something to do with that, almost that switch from childhood into this more grown up version of myself. And I know it was way too early for me to really be, acting like a grown up. I had this nickname as a kid, and I realized a little while ago as I was kind of unpacking my story, and I realized that, well, when did I lose that nickname? Like it just suddenly disappeared. Like suddenly no one called me by that name anymore. And I do this breath work every now and again, and I tend to get these kind of epiphanies about sort of these younger versions of myself, and one of the things was exactly to do with this name and kind of how I would have been as a child. You know, there's a joy and a playfulness and a quirkiness about me when I think about myself as a child, and in this breath work, I had this kind of an epiphany that actually that's kind of that child self that's associated with that nickname, and that at one point was just kind of lost. And then after that, the self that I really remember and know myself by is quite rigid, is kind of a little bit uptight, you know, follows the rules, is high achieving. You know, when I think about school, I was quite hard to really get to know because I had a hard time really opening up to people. There was a sense for me that no one really wants to know me. So it's better to kind of keep myself to myself unless someone really expresses interest. And then I might share. So again, I guess there's that theme of disconnection. Like, let's keep performing. Let's keep this ball rolling. Let's do the things that I'm supposed to be doing, but let's not offer any more of myself, because there was that fear really that no more is wanted. No more is wanted, and actually that any more would be a burden.
Did these sort of rules you lived by, these, these ethics and things, like, were they, like, consciously explicit from your mother, or did you just sort of learn them through experience and figured out, "Oh, this works. Let's just keep doing this because this is working and I'm surviving."
100% from experience. I was not aware of them at all. Like, I just, for the longest time, I just thought this is just who I am. This is just my personality. These are just things that are important to me. And I think this is also kind of, I think, where my sister perhaps comes in a little bit, because these are all the things that she didn't do and she got kicked out of the house. So there's a message there, you know, follow the rules, stay in school, get good grades, don't mess with the wrong crowd. And I always had very good friends from, you know, approved kind of friends. And the other side of that was because my mom herself had issues with alcohol. You know, she was in a violent relationship. She never seemed to have enough money. She had her own mental health issues. I mean, undiagnosed. This is me just kind of looking back, and with the knowledge and experience that I have now looking back, I absolutely believe she was depressed most of kind of my childhood. You know, I learned not to be a burden, that I had to sort things out for myself. I had to look after myself. I couldn't do anything that would cause any more issues for her, because I never felt that she had the capacity to deal with anything else. I have this one very clear memory. Actually, I was about 12, and we had actually just kind of run away from her abusive partner. We kind of, he was at work, and we kind of secretly, one day we just, you know, my sister and her partner, you know, helped us literally just move all our stuff over to this new flat in secret while this guy was at work. And it was in this period, so you would have thought that we were in a bit more of a stable environment, but actually just about 3 weeks after this whole move, my mom actually ended up reconciling with him, and we kind of stayed living separately for a while. But he was kind of back on the scene. But I had this habit of, you know, my mom was working very long days, so after school I would usually be by myself for quite a few hours before she got home. And but then when she did get home, you know, I would kind of offload my day. You know, I would be talking about, you know, this happened, all of the kind of usual stuff that you can imagine a 12-year-old wanting to talk about. And I see that as really kind of seeking that connection with her and wanting her to be involved in my life and wanting her to know what was going on. But it was really just one incident, and I remember so clearly. My memory from my childhood, by the way, is pretty hazy a lot of the times. Like I have very little kind of specific memories, and that's quite common with kind of complex trauma. But I remember this one thing, and she just said that she kind of asked me to stop talking, and she said that because it's tiring her, that or that I am tiring her, and it's one sentence, and it's such a kind of throwaway. I'm sure she doesn't even remember it, but it's something that stayed with me for a really long time because that for me was such a kind of clear message of I am too much. I can't even talk about my day without being tiring for, my own mom. And obviously this comment wasn't in isolation for her or for me. She had a long day and I can understand all of the reasoning, why someone who is dysregulated would make a comment like that with no kind of ill intention. And for me, I think also the impact would have been much smaller if we had a really solid connection and relationship kind of up to this point. But because we didn't, that one kind of throwaway comment left a really deep mark, and it really impacted how I was able to connect with people moving forward. Because for me, that was that kind of final message of no, you really shouldn't share about yourself unless people are really interested. And the way they show that they're really interested is if they ask. So don't share anything unless you've been explicitly asked about yourself. And that's kind of the pattern then that I carried on for quite a number of years into my adulthood until a friend of mine actually kind of confronted me about that because she felt like our friendship was kind of one-sided. She was sharing all about herself, and I was there for her and the listening ear and all of that, but that I never really volunteered a lot about myself and how I was doing back. And this is totally part of that kind of pattern. But realizing how it then impacted my friendship was quite a wake up call to actually be like, okay, maybe something needs to shift here if I want my relationships and friendships moving forward to be more mutual and kind of really connected.
Yeah. But did it feel strange at first when this person actually wanted to learn about you and wanted you to share yourself, because you had grown up so much almost assuming or believing that, "No, people don't want to know me," and then somebody does care about me a little bit? How did that feel?
Yeah, a bit odd, isn't it? Isn't it? Like I think it's this weird disconnect within myself as well. Because if you had asked me at the time if I believe that like this friend and some others care about me, I would have said absolutely yes. But did I really actually feel it is a different question. And that's where this kind of confrontation of that pattern really made an impact. It felt really weird. I didn't think much about it, but it felt weird.
What do you think your body was like the whole time? I mean, you can't go back to age 3, but you can imagine, given your education and experience, and then until whenever there was a shift, when your body did kind of release and open up, in terms of emotion and feeling, and you got out of strictly your head.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really think I was basically just living in survival mode most of my up to really, oh my goodness, probably at least 25, if not a bit more. Yeah, and I mean, those experiences early life and not having had really any kind of stable adult with a mature nervous system to kind of co-regulate with and learn how to even deal with emotions in any kind of a healthy way. The only things I could see was kind of that emotional suppression and let's just put things in a box and push them aside kind of mentality, very much like emotions are kind of unnecessary, that kind of sense. And that's something I carried with me Even as a teenager, goodness, like even joy, you think you'll be able to just kind of enjoy yourself. But as a teenager, I remember, hanging out with a friend group and being really annoyed because they were just goofing around, being playful, just messing around. And for me, I was just like, oh, kind of these children, that kind of attitude because yeah, I just could not connect with that side of myself at all. And yeah, it's funny. It's like I was completely shut down in a lot of ways. Still, it's kind of this dysfunctional freeze almost, like you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, but you're not really emotionally there at all.
Okay, so I said in your head because I guess I'm mirroring my reaction to I mean, I didn't have complex PTSD to the level that you did, but I mean, I grew up in this big family, 10 brothers and sisters. Have a mother, have a father, they're all good, but, you're kinda off on your own. Older brother, older sister, or like your sister got kind of ostracized. They weren't kicked out, but they were, essentially, emotionally kicked out just by doing the bad things, drinking and partying and not studying, etcetera. So I became the academic or whatever, the good schoolboy. But then I got really into my head, just like all head and just thinking and study and logic. And then I went on to naturally study philosophy. When I found philosophy, I was like, "Oh my god, this is like perfect. This is a perfect match for me." And a lot of people don't feel that. People feel, "Oh, philosophy, this is what are we doing?" Um, but then even then we're even further, taught like emotion is bad, logic. And then eventually, I mean, it must have been like in my mid-20s when I kind of really discovered my body. So I was sort of maybe assuming, "Oh yeah, you were in your head too, but you didn't get in your head. You more like I was maybe in flight or something like that, perhaps." Maybe you were in more of a freeze, kinda shutdown kinda mode, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, but it's really interesting you say that because I definitely had a phase of very that sounds very similar to what you're experiencing, and maybe I also misrepresented here. To be honest, if I think about it now, the freeze probably came a little bit later. I think you're right about that. There was, and yeah, when I went to uni, yeah, goodness, philosophy was a big interest massively, and I really got into personality tests in that period, and I discovered at the time, Myers-Briggs was a huge interest suddenly because I felt like it really explained my experience, and I was an INTJ, very much that thinking part, very very strong, and I guess I was in uni and I was in a research universe that really kind of prized that kind of thinking and exploring. So maybe that context of that at the time as well. But I really really leaned into that at that time. And looking back, absolutely, it was actually a form of escape for me. It was just another way for me to avoid looking at the feelings or feeling the feelings at all. Yeah, it allowed me to stay safe in the head and stay far away from everything that kind of made me more uncomfortable. Like at the time, if you had told me like what my like top strength would be, it would have absolutely been kind of, yeah, academia and analytical and abstract kind of thinking, those kind of things, which is crazy because now, I mean, yeah, of course some of that is still there, but nowhere near that kind of level that it was in that period.
But it makes sense because, the thinking and the academics and that whole, learning world, thinking world is something you can kind of control. I mean, you can study, you can sit there. It's basically safe. You're not gonna get attacked in that world. I mean, it's mostly an independent kind of world. It's you with yourself and these books, so it's a very safe place, but also, like you said, it further reinforces this disconnection from the body, so, yeah, it does make you wonder, like, how many of these hardcore academics and people, what really went on early on. Maybe academia might be an adaptation. It surely was for me. But I had been kind of training that brain muscle, I think, because all I had. Yeah, thinking is a that inner analytical world is a kind of nice safe space for the time being. So I'm thankful for it. But eventually, you got to get into your body eventually, right? You got to face that stuff.
Well, 100%. Yeah, I mean, for me, academia was amazing for a long time because it also gave me a sense of purpose and achievement for a while, where I kind of would have felt quite lost otherwise. It really gave me something that I felt I could be really good at. And at the time, I had kind of no idea really yet what I would do with my life. So yeah, academia was a real saving grace. But interestingly, like you say, like you can't kind of do that forever, hiding in these parts, no matter how helpful they are, because that was also the period where my mental health really came crashing down. Until then, I feel like these coping strategies were really effective, but they do tend to outlive themselves at one point, and that's where you're kind of faced with the facts of either you have to start confronting the reality and the trauma and all of that stuff, or you kind of get stuck in the mental health struggles.
So you went off to school in the UK for a bit, and then you went to Amsterdam, and then you were saying while in Amsterdam, sometimes you were, struggling to get out of bed, feeling numb, just nothing could spark excitement, and you realized it was depression eventually. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that period and the sunrise out of all of it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, I think depression kind of really caught me by surprise because in a lot of way I almost felt like I was living the dream. I had really wanted to go to that particular university in Amsterdam. I felt really lucky that I got in. I it was amazing in a lot of ways, and like I said, that the thinking part was really thriving, and I felt like, this is kind of my place. And at the same time, everything else kind of felt like it was falling apart internally. Like externally, no one even knew what was going on. But yeah, the time came when I just found myself, yeah, really struggling to get out, to go to class, to work on my assignments, anything. Like the only time when I was then able to get out was when I knew that, well, if I don't do it, then I'm gonna fail. Then I'm gonna fail the class. They had quite strict like attendance requirements and things. So I did kind of the least that I could get away with. I managed to do. And I mean, in that, the thinking part was amazing because I still did actually, really well for myself, considering how little effort I was really able to put into my studies. But in truth, yeah, I was feeling really disconnected. I was quite far away from kind of my church community, and even when I was there, kind of present, I realized it was all kind of in this almost performative sort of keep doing the right things, almost kind of a fake it till you make it sort of feeling. Of, yeah, it's this odd thing of being there but not really being there, going through the motions but not really again experiencing my faith in the community and the friends that I did have around me. So at the end of the day, I was just again kind of back home crashing and not really getting up unless I really had to again. And yeah, just the word numb is really characteristic of that period of my life as well.
Okay, so you bring in an interesting, important piece here too, and this is an important part of your therapy you provide now too. God, faith in God, your connection with the divine. Um, you did have this. It seems most of your life, if not all your life, you had at least connection with God or whatever you want to call it, and then perhaps these people in that church community. But like you said, were you really connected? So maybe your connection with the divine also changed throughout this whole process, where maybe you weren't as connected as you thought you were, or maybe God and something this bigger than you was there, kind of keeping you safe the whole time. But I'll let you get into it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I absolutely believe God has been keeping me safe all this time, even when I didn't feel connected, even before I had any awareness of him at all. My family are not actually religious at all. I came to faith when I was 14, and yeah, that's been kind of totally my own sort of separate journey. And I do believe that even at that age, I had very genuine experiences with God, which is what solidified for me that this is the path that I wanted to take. I was kind of considering this for a year and some before I kind of made the decision for myself. So the thinking part, even at sort of 13, 14, it was very active and kind of weighing things up. But I and this is just looking back, isn't it? Like, I do recognize now that this kind of performative, be a good girl, follow the rules, earn the love that I grew up with in my home, I took into my faith as well. And I mean, in some ways, it was quite a seamless transition because, I mean, we know religion comes with a lot of rules very, very often. And it was a lot easier for me to kind of adopt the rules rather than actually experience God's grace that I also believe to be very real. But I kind of took the concept of grace as something I understood, but again, something I wasn't actually experiencing. So when my mental health came crashing down in my 20s, I kind of, kept going for a long time with my faith. Like I said, that going through the motions because I knew sort of the right things to do. And for a while, I didn't really even almost notice that the experiential element of my faith wasn't really there anymore. But of course, at one point, I realized that actually the performative works were not actually fueling my faith anymore. It just felt like an empty thing I was doing. And I kind of call that my crisis of faith because I actually completely walked away from my faith kind of overnight because it felt like that internal conflict of what I believed in and what my life should look like as a committed Christian, and then the reality of my struggles for so many years. It just wasn't matching up, and I couldn't kind of keep forcing that anymore. And so I completely walked away for about a year and a half, and actually only came back when I met the man who's now my husband, who was a Christian and who helped me really understand grace on an experiential level. And that shifted everything for me.
Let's talk about him because he seems to be a big turning point in this journey that kind of gave you a lot of what you didn't have for most of your life prior to him.
Massively. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if someone asked me like what initially drew me to him, I would say his consistency. And that's exactly where you kind of hit the nail on the head with. That's exactly what I never really had before. And I realized only when I met him actually how much of a sense of safety that consistency provided me with, and how much I was able to really reconnect with myself and with people and with God actually, from that base level of safety. And that's kind of why I now, like, in my therapy practice, speak so much about kind of how our attachment style impacts our ability to actually connect with God as it does with, connecting with any human being, because that's been my experience, until I was able to experience even a glimpse of a secure attachment with a person. I wasn't really able to connect with God in that way either. So you're absolutely right. My husband was a huge, huge turning point.
It's interesting how it only takes one person, how one person, your husband, could maybe not undo everything, but in a way bring you back to life.
Yeah, it is amazing. And I mean, it wasn't an instantaneous thing, right? It's been a long journey. I mean, we've been together coming up to 7 years now, and some things we're still working out. Certainly in the first few years, there's a lot of conflict, and a lot of conflict precisely because, and looking back, I know it's because I wasn't feeling safe. I was reading into every small action because I was kind of coming at this relationship through the lens of this rejection and abandonment that I had experienced, in particular from my dad, kind of that internalization of I am not good enough. So everything in our relationship to start with was kind of being interpreted by me through this lens. Every little thing that he did that I didn't quite agree with, it became this thing of, oh, really, you don't care about me, you don't even think about me, you don't even consider me with these things, which wasn't true at all. And these were all like really, really minor situations, like he ate all the avocados that I had, planned for a meal the next day, or, whatever, like things like this, very minor, and they became really big arguments. But then at one point, you start to kind of work out these patterns of like, well, what is this really about? And this is where I also believe, God was present in our relationship and actually revealed things to me that I don't think I would have kind of with my natural understanding been able to come to.
Yeah. Well, we're lucky that some people grow up in, safe, loving environments. I imagine your husband's, upbringing must have been not as bad as yours. Because how can you be so understanding and loving and patient? So, for example, bring it back to my story, my mom died a few years ago, and I was still in the amidst this independent survival, do it myself, self-reliance mode, but, that kinda woke me up. But then amongst that time, this friend, I never really believed that anyone was my friend. I'm like, "They're not really my friend. They don't really like me. They're just using me for they want a guy to hang out with or whatever." But one guy, he just usually you push people away, right? But this guy would just he saw it for what it was, and he didn't run away. He kept coming back and kept hugging me and loving me and being there, and I was like, "You're my friend? A real friend?" And I don't know why I didn't think I had friends. Thinking back, I had friends, but for some reason, I didn't believe these people were really my friends. But this is like, just a few years ago, and I was like, "Whoa, this is what it feels like to have a friend? Just unconditional love? That's bizarre." So I was like, "Wow, how beautiful that there are these people who they're just in a safe space. They feel safe in their body. They can give unconditional love and feel that and believe in that, and then spread it to you." And so I think again, that experience with that friend really also kind of woke me up. But yeah, the point there is just like, yeah, just one safe, loving person can really give you faith in people.
100%. Yeah, I mean, for me, that switch has been everything, and it's really, yeah, opened up everything that I've done since. Like even my kind of therapy journey and all of that. Like I knew I wanted to be a therapist since I was in uni. What I was 21 or something, and I didn't actually start this process until after I met my husband. And because it's almost like my dreams were also on hold. And I think there's that kind of underlying belief that comes with insecure attachment often is that kind of sense of deep sort of unworthiness of love, but also of your dreams actually being fulfilled. And so the impact of having a person like that who you can experience that safe connection with goes so wide into potentially every area of life. And for me, it really opened up the dreams as well. Wow, actually I am worthy of pursuing my dreams, and I can make that happen, and I'm not alone trying to do this. And that was everything.
And he helped, and it's not just him, there's a lot of things going on, there's God, there's things in the background, but he was a big sort of catalyst, infused this sort of spirit into you, and now you are helping, spread that into other people. You can be that safe, loving, understanding person with your clients, and that's it's just a beautiful it's so beautiful how it's this domino butterfly effect of love or whatever you wanna call it, kindness, being there.
Absolutely, yeah. I guess the way I look at it is really, yeah, being the person for others that I really needed and would have needed a lot earlier than I had it. I mean, yeah, I mean, my husband has been really the big rock there. I've had my own therapy that was really impactful in really unpacking a lot of this, and also being able to become that person for my husband as well. It's also not kind of this one way street, but that's all been a process. But yeah, it's amazing to now be in a position to actually be able to offer to others what I so desperately needed, and have seen how it's transformed my life into something that, at one point I wouldn't have even been able to really dream of, wouldn't have allowed myself to dream possible.
So it also changes this independence, self-reliance piece, right? Whereas before you thought, "I have to do all of this myself," or they have to do that themselves. Why are they working together? Now, like, say, around the house, etcetera, in your life, you notice yourself, "Whoa, who am I? I'm different than before. I don't do these things, but now I it's almost like I'm a normal person or something."
Yeah, and I think like the way you describe it is exactly that. Like a lot of these changes, like you don't realize until kind of after the fact. You suddenly have this moment of like, oh wait, I just responded to this totally differently than I would have maybe just a couple months ago, or this situation didn't trigger me like it would have, or yeah, I'm able to actually share some stuff that's going on in a new way. Like all of this is progress and in the right direction. But often you don't realize it while you're in it. It's a little bit of hindsight that allows you to see it, and that's part of why relationships, or relationship with your therapist included, is so powerful, because having that kind of outside view in can also help identify these small moments of growth that so often we miss in ourselves while we're in it, while someone on the outside is looking like, wow, you know that's amazing, you did something you wouldn't have been able to do.
So how are emotions and your body and this playful, goofy side, what's the state of all that now? Did it open back up, or are you still, you know, not able to play or feel? It sounds like it's better, maybe not perfect, but, yeah, what's it like now?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's definitely not perfect. Definitely have my days when things feel heavier, and there's a fear on those days that I kind of get back stuck in that freeze, kind of numb freeze state. But actually, yeah, things feel a lot lighter most of the time, and there's a flexibility, I think, in my nervous system now, much more so than what I would have kind of been used to. And that's the flexibility to really feel all the emotions, but not kind of get stuck in them. And that's exactly what our nervous systems are really designed to do, right? We're supposed to be able to, experience anxiety and that flight sense, or be able to experience anger when we need to stand up for ourselves, or fight for ourselves, or or someone we care about. And also, freeze is also there for a reason, again, to protect ourselves, but we're not supposed to kind of live in those states in a long-term basis. So the new experience for me is really being able to move through the ups and the downs, but come back to the rest and digest state, and actually come back to calm, and really experience that, really for the first time, to be honest. The mistake that a childhood like mine kind of fools you into is that emotional suppression is the calm, that avoiding emotions and avoiding conflict is the calm, but it's not right. Ultimately, all those things will start to bubble back up. So, that nervous system healing, that trauma work, that somatic work allowed me to, for the first time, really experience what calm feels like when it's real calm, real rest without that underlying stuff, without the shutdown, without that freeze, the numbness.
And physiologically, it probably feels different too. I imagine your heart's beating slower, you're breathing better, and all of that. And then there's some people who are stuck. They're kind of stuck and there's some stress or event that happens, a small thing, whatever. Your husband eats avocados, whatever, and they get looping in this sympathetic or shutdown nervous system, for example. Other people are able to like have these stressful events happen, and maybe it's through understanding, or it's just because now they're have a safe, regulated nervous system. They're able to like kind of be like, okay, and then just recover after minutes or hours or whatever. How do you it's kind of a big question is like, how do you heal trauma? But, what's the difference between these people, and how can someone who's in more of this stuck kind of space, kinda nudge themselves towards that other land where they can snap back and, get back into, healthy breath and heartbeat and smile and calm?
Slowly, slowly, and with a safe person, and that a lot of the times is therapy, but it of course really helps to have other safe people around you, and it's safely kind of working through the trauma and those experiences, especially with complex trauma, acknowledging and kind of identifying those parts that are carrying these coping strategies, and working with them, really. I work with sort of parts work or internal family systems therapy quite a lot, and the belief is that we'll have these parts that kind of get stuck in these younger versions of ourselves, and start carrying these coping mechanisms that are designed to protect you, but now are kind of getting in the way. But it's through the unburdening of these parts that they're able to kind of release these coping strategies, the depression, the anxiety, the some addictions, even, eating disorders, not to mention like these snap reactions, like really angry outbursts and things like that. These are ways that these parts believe that they're solving, keeping us safe, things that they learn at one point, including from our environment. And one way of connecting with these parts is the somatic piece, because these parts have a way of making themselves known through sensations. So this is where this type of trauma work really connects with the somatic element as well, and really you can start to kind of track how these sensations associated with these parts or emotions, if you will, start to settle. And so little by little, as the person themselves is able to connect with their body and these parts, actually we kind of reparent ourselves in the process and become the support, the secure support for ourselves.
Okay, so you're working from this framework of internal family systems where we have these parts, and then you're using certain somatic body-based practices to reconnect with and kind of help those parts. Are there any other pieces to this puzzle?
I mean, there's potentially a lot. I mean, I work integratively, so I pull on all kinds of different things, and like this part stuff in this kind of framework may not make sense to everybody. There are other frameworks, like I think Janina Fisher's sort of trauma framework. It also uses parts, but it's a bit more straightforward, and so that can be really helpful, and sometimes actually show that to clients, and they can kind of pinpoint, oh yeah, I see, I see myself here, I see this and that, and it kind of helps bring that cognitive part almost back into, because when we're in the stress responses, our kind of the cognitive thinking kind of goes a bit out of the window. So when when clients find themselves really deep in anxiety, for example, it's not really rational. Some of the fears that we deal with then are not really rational, but understanding where it's kind of coming from, and what's a reaction to some of these life experiences can be really helpful to kind of start bringing more structure back into life, while also maintaining that somatic piece of where we're experiencing these emotions, really, especially when we've been so disconnected from the body, usually for quite a long time.
Hope is a word that comes up with you. What is hope for you today? How would you define hope, and why is it important?
Hope is kind of like, that's the first thing that comes to mind, is that light at the end of the tunnel. I think we can deal with most things if we know that there's going to be an end to it. It's a season. So for me, that's what it is. Like, even if you're in a really difficult state, knowing that at one point it will end, and that's something that's really hard to see. Certainly with depression, like it becomes such a dark, endless hole, and it kind of strips you from all of that energy and motivation to even do anything about it. So yeah, that's where that dark tunnel kind of comes in, but seeing a little bit of that light. And what comes to therapy, and this is what I tell my clients a lot, especially at the beginning of the work together, is that I can hold that hope when they can't, because very often they're not really seeing past that immediate relief yet. Whereas I can, because I'm not in that anymore, and I'm not in that for their life. So sometimes somebody else needs to hold that hope. And that in itself can be helpful. It's that reminder that something different is possible.